Okay, hello everyone who just joined us. We will give ourselves like 3-4 more minutes to see if anyone else will join, because we had like more than 100 people interested, but usually on these events not all of them come. So we will see how many people will be here today. Yeah, so I will start from the agenda right now. I think we don't have to wait for our people. Like you probably saw in the description, we will start from Rob. Rob is from Australia, so he will be first. So if he needs to go, we can actually continue with him, but hopefully he will stay for the networking part as well. And if you will have any questions for Rob, you can start asking them during his speech. So later I will read them, read for Rob. But also you can wait for the end. You will be all able to ask the questions by yourself. And then we will go to Karin. And after that also we will have Q&A session. And of course, for the end, if you want to, you can stay and we can do quick networking session to meet each other, to see if we can help each other in some way, because this is actually, okay, Connor, I need to mute you. I'm sorry. You can turn on your microphone later if you want to ask questions. But yeah, there was some sound that probably would be interrupting us later. So don't worry, you can unmute yourself later, but right now we will focus on the speakers. Okay, so maybe I will start from who we are, like organizers, and why we are organizing the event. So I'm from the GMI group. We are creating custom software for companies, and actually our goal was to find our niche, the industry we are interested in, and it turns out that we are feeling great in smart city. So we started to attend events about smart city, and we realized that there's not so many events that that are actually giving us the value that we can meet people there. So we decided that we want to create our own community and create the series of events for this community. So this event is, of course, the first one. But as you saw in the description, we started the LinkedIn group that you can join. And there we want to ask you, like, what subject is interesting for you? What do you want to hear? And we will organize the events for you with people like Rob, with people like Karin. And I think it will bring you a lot of value. So yes, today we'll start from Rob, as I said, and later Karin will share her thoughts. So I think we have some people right now. If someone will join, it's okay. But one more thing, this meeting is being recorded because we had so many interested people, and I guess some of them will not be able to join us. So we are all being recorded right now, and the recording will be sent to all of you and all of the people that couldn't join us. Okay, Rob, so it's your turn. I will be quiet for some time now, and you can go.
Fantastic. Let me just share my screen. Just hang on a second. I'm just going to get this right. Trying to get this out of here. Just give me 2 seconds. Sorry.
No problem. Take all the time you need. We have some time.
Right. Okay. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
I can. So I think everyone can.
Fantastic. All right. So welcome, everybody. I think we've got people from all over the world actually on this call. I am here dialing in from Sydney, Australia, where it actually, for those of you who are in Europe, it feels like a winter's Europe, a winter's day in Europe today, so it's quite a cold day. But so welcome everybody from Sydney, Australia. So my name is Rob Brown, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Kerb. And I'll tell you a little bit about Kerb before I talk about sort of the way that COVID has changed the parking landscape for cities right across the world. And you know, these are cities in the developed world and the developing world. So essentially, Kerb is it's a parking marketplace. So it's a global. If you think about Airbnb, for example, for room rentals, Kerb does what Airbnb does, but for parking spaces. So it aggregates parking spaces across the world. So if you think about every single vehicle that is driving in the streets of Hungary or, you know, the UK or, you know, London or Los Angeles or Sydney, wherever it is in the world, every single vehicle has freed up a parking space somewhere else. And most vehicles spend most of their lives parked, but when they're driving between journeys from point A to B, they freed up a parking space somewhere else. So a typical example would be you drive to work in the city, every morning. You freed up a parking space at the place you live. So what Kerb does, one of the things that Kerb does is it opens up those parking spaces so people can rent them, and the owners of those spaces can lease them. And it's not just residential spaces. It's, you know, when you think about most of the parking spaces in your city that you're sitting in today sit empty most of the day. And when I say that, when you think about you think about a church, or you think about a school, or even a hotel under normal time, it's got an empty car park between Monday to Friday between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. So Kerb unlocks those parking spaces and essentially gets cars off the streets. So that's the first thing we do. The second thing that we do is we actually have a piece of hardware that one of the challenges as a parking platform is that you have to be able to open car park gates. If you can't open gates, then you're not going to get into car parks. So I can talk all I want about Kerb being, you know, global, etc. But if we don't have a way to open any car park gate in your city or a roller door, then, you know, we don't have a marketplace. So Kerb has a little proprietary box called the Kerb box. It's very, very cheap. It sits inside every parking gate, essentially, and it allows you to open the gate from your phone. And then the third thing that Kerb is, it's a management platform, car park management software for car park owners. So buildings that have, you know, whether you're a commercial building, a residential building, or a car park operator. You know, so Kerb helps manage car parks through technology. We are not a car park management platform, but we are a software that allows car park owners and operators to deliver more profitability and margin from their car parks. So that's Kerb. So when we talk about sort of parking is a really interesting. I think it's a really interesting. I've always been very interested in disruptive technologies, where the intersection, if you like, between disruptive technologies and industries that have not changed over the last 40, 50 years. So when you think about an industry that hasn't changed, you look at, for example, a university. I used to work in the university sector before, you know, internationally. And a university essentially is pretty much the same today as it was 40 years ago. A doctor's office or a doctor's surgery is the same. They still ask you to fill out your form on a piece of paper and wait 20 minutes. You have to do the same time every time you go. That has not changed in 30, 40 years. A movie theater really hasn't changed in the last 30, 40 years, but a car park is the same. It has not changed. A car park experience of 40 years ago is the same as it is today. So When you think about the changes that COVID has brought, COVID has accelerated changes in lots of industries, and parking has always been an unloved part of everything we do every day. Nobody enjoys parking. Nobody likes parking, and from a customer experience, it's generally a very bad experience. Um, uh, it doesn't matter whether you're in, as I say, London, Los Angeles, or Lagos in Nigeria, it's the same experience. It's horrible. You go into a nice building, shiny tower, could be an office tower, most modern office tower in your city, but one floor down from the ground floor, the car park experience is awful. And that's just, it's what we call a grudge purchase. People hate paying for parking because it's such a bad experience, but it's also a grudge service. So car park owners and operators don't put any love into the car park. And yet the car park experience, the car park, when you think about most journeys in a vehicle, almost every journey in a vehicle starts and finishes in a car park. And so, when you think about the data opportunity, for the places a person parks, if everybody on this call knew where I parked every single month, it would tell you a very interesting story about my life, where I live, where I work, where I play, where I pray, all those kind of different things. So what Kerb is doing is we are aggregating all of those parking spaces and those parking data points to improve the customer experience for the parker and to improve sort of the data visibility for the car park owner or the operator. So when you think about parking in a post-COVID world, certain things have really, really changed. The world's never going to be the same again. People talk about going back to the old world, the old normal, but the old normal is finished. It's like the Second World War, the world before the Second World War, the world after the Second World War was a very different world to the world before the Second World War. And the world after COVID, however long COVID lasts, and it's probably going to last another 2-3 years until we just get used to living with it, it's going to be a different world. For example, here in Sydney, Australia, we've got COVID very, very much under control. But people are scared, and there hasn't been a COVID case in Sydney, not a death, a case, not even a case in Sydney for about 3 months. But the city's empty. So nobody's going back. Everyone's working from home now. And people go into the city once. I went into the city today for the only time in my week this week. I just went into the city, but it's empty. It's 10% people in the city. So certain things have changed. Now, when we talk about the world has changed, I believe that COVID has accelerated the broader opportunity for Kerb by at least a decade, and for smart cities. And there are a few things that have changed. One of the things that is that identity matters a lot more than it did. So when you think about 9/11, for example, one of the legacies of 9/11 was that it increased airport security. We still have the same increased airport security 20 years later, and we just got used to it. But it means that you never have to worry about who's sitting in seat 32C because he looks a bit strange. You know that the airline that you're flying with knows who that person is. He's been security checked. And so we feel safer. So one of the legacies, I believe, of COVID will be that identity, even getting into a building, will matter a lot more than it did before. And one of the only ways to get people to go back into the city and feel safe is to know that people have been vaccinated, that the woman or the man or the teenager sitting next to you at your desk in your office has been vaccinated and is not carrying a deadly pathogen. And I think that's going to be the new normal. I will just have to accept that identity matters more. And Kerb operates all over the world. We're in sort of 32 countries. And we're seeing this especially in Asia. where now you have to check into even the office. You have to go back to the office or the shopping mall. In Australia, you have to check into a bar, a restaurant, a gym, sports facility, but not into your office or not into the shopping mall. But in many countries, you do. So identity is going to be a big thing. Hygiene, obviously, is everybody's sensitive about hygiene now. Nobody wants to touch dirty things, and the car park's always been a dirty place. And so, hands-free parking, touchless parking, accessing via your phone is going to become a very, very big competitive advantage. And data, which days does John come to the office to park in the office? How many times does Julie park every, this kind of, what time did Julie enter? What time did John leave? This kind of data is going to become very, very important. And today it's very, very hard to walk into a car park and know, which car belongs to anybody. And if you think about airlines are probably the gold standard, and hotels as well, but especially airlines, because they know exactly who's on the plane and people feel safer because of that. Couple of other things, driving, for all the smart city initiatives around transportation, public transport, and getting people onto public transport. And that's one of Kerb's key selling points to governments, is that we discourage people from driving into the city, and we encourage people to park around transport hubs, but by parking in a church or a hotel or somebody's private parking space. But COVID has turned that round. And so for smart cities, people feel safer in their car. They don't want to get on a bus or a train at the moment. Now, of course, that will come back. But at the moment, people driving matters more than it did before COVID. But also half-empty car parks matter more. So, when you think, I look at a city like Sydney or, or sort of London or New York, 15 months ago, 16 months ago, they had a different problem. They had too many people in the buildings and not enough places to park underneath the building. Now they've got hardly anyone in the building, and they've got empty parking basements. So for commercial landlords, commercial building owners, now that empty car park matters because they need to try and monetize it. And that is, that's one of the things that we do. And then smart city initiatives. Obviously the theme of today's, today's sort of webinar is around sort of smart city initiatives. And I think we'll look back on COVID. Nobody ever 15 months ago could imagine the streets of Paris or the streets of Budapest or the streets of Berlin empty, no vehicles at all in them, without Photoshop or something like that to show what it would look like with no vehicles. But we all experienced that. We've all experienced that multiple times. So I think this is a really, really big initiative, a really big opportunity for cities. And we're seeing this, in Europe, where a lot of you are today, you look at a city like Paris, the Paris city municipality has reclaimed the Champs-Élysées, one of the probably the most famous street in the world, is going to be pedestrianized. It's only going to have two lanes for vehicles. So that's an opportunity that wouldn't have existed. So I think there's a big opportunity in terms of smart cities. So in terms of a couple of things here, and again, I just want to make sure that I'm not here, guys, to sell Kerb at all. I'm just using sort of, the parking and what we're doing in smart parking to relate it back to smart city initiatives. But when we talk about identity, knowing who's in the car park, and Kerb does that because our parkers open the gate with their phone. Okay, they don't open the gate with a ticket. They open the gate. So it's really when a person's phone's in the car park, your building or your, knows who's in the car park. And we do that via the app and the box that sits inside your existing gates. So being able to control parker entry, who comes into the building, do we, Kerb's got all these different controls that people allow. But this identity thing is going to become really, really important. you know, there's not, as I say, there's not a single car park in the world really where you could walk up and say, we know who owns that blue Toyota. But Kerb allows you to do that. And it's not about the car, the license plate, the number plate. It's about who drove it into the car park. And that has huge implications, especially for buildings where people, you know, a big percentage of people enter the building via the car park. So a retail mall, for example, might be a good example of that. So identity is super, super important. And obviously Kerb gives you all sorts of, you know, ability to control who comes in, who doesn't come in, and what they do inside that car park. Hygiene, we've talked about, you know, the car park experience. As I say, if you think about, I don't know, take an office, like a beautiful office tower in your city or a hotel. If you walked into that hotel or that office foyer and it hadn't been cleaned for 6 weeks, there were cigarette butts on the floor, it smelt of urine, maybe there was dog feces on, you know, there was litter. Well, that's the car park experience underneath the building that, you know, some of you are sitting in listening to this today. And so, you know, that's just not going to be acceptable anymore in a post-COVID world. So the whole hygiene thing, and what we're seeing around the world is that drivers just don't want to touch anything. They feel safe in their car, which is why they're driving in their own vehicle. But they don't want to lower the window. So they'll go to a car park, they'll choose one car park over another if that car park offers hands-free access and you can book in advance and you don't need to touch a pay machine. You just pay automatically as you drive out, just as you do with Uber. So that's a really big point for us. The other thing is data. So data matters more. And I touched on this, data and identity obviously are linked. But when you think about data, you know, who's in your car park now? There's not a single technology at the moment that could tell you that, but every single airline in the world, as I said, knows exactly who's in their plane right now. Not that there are many planes flying right now, but you never, ever, ever wondered who was in that plane, how many times they've flown. Are they a bronze, a silver, a gold flyer? So, you know, this opportunity now of knowing that car was driven in by somebody called Jane Smith, and Jane is a loyal parker and she should be treated as such. And because Kerb knows who's in the car park, and as you come into the car park, you can start being really personal about that. We see a future, especially in a retail environment, in a smart city environment, where you should never ever have to pay for parking again when you're parking, for example, in a shopping center. Why? Because you know, the shopping center will know if you're a regular parker, and if you are, maybe Starbucks has paid for your parking today. And as you drive in, it will say, "Welcome back, Jane. Your parking's been paid for today by Starbucks." And you can only do that if you know the person. And you know, as I said, Kerb knows that person. Driving, I've talked about. Driving matters more now. More and more people are driving. This is a setback for smart cities, but I don't see it as we don't see it at Kerb as a long sort of, you know, a long-term trend, I should say. I think once people become comfortable again and cities start filling up again, which they will eventually, you know, people will feel more comfortable to come back on public transport. But at the moment, driving matters more. So how do we embrace that opportunity and make drivers feel safer and allow people to book in advance, for example, book their parking in advance before they get there and know that they're not going to need to sort of, you know, struggle with gates and tickets and pay machines, etc. Last but one, you know, I talked about empty car parks. This is really, really important. And, you know, when you think somebody like just so many businesses have been affected by COVID, and anybody who owns a car park, you know, or operates a car park has been massively affected by COVID, especially in Europe, where, you know, the last 15, 16 months, you know, at least half of that time, the continent has been in lockdown. And it's very, very hard to sort of, you know, for car park owners and landlords now to sort of operate a car park profitably. So there's an opportunity there, and Kerb allows car parks to strip out a lot of their costs that they previously had in a pre-COVID world. And as I said, I'm not here to sell Kerb, but it's you know, that reality for building owners and landlords and operators is a real reality. They were operating already on very, very slim margins, especially the operators of car parks. And now in a post-COVID world, their problems have got even worse. So being able to fill a car park, and, you know, pre-COVID, it was not, you know, if I'd said to a building, look, we can help you fill your car park, they would have said, well, no, it doesn't work like that, because you can't just let anybody into our building. We have to know who's in the building. We have to be able to check their ID, for example. And pre-COVID, Kerb couldn't do that, but now we can. And so that profitability and being able to sort of, you know, strip out some of the costs of running a car park in the smart cities of the future is going to be super, super important. And then finally, smart city initiatives. So, you know, as I say, the theme of this podcast is, or this webinar is around smart cities. And while the last 15, 16 months have been incredibly difficult for the world, I think the smart city initiatives and the smart city agendas of cities right across the world will look back and actually see COVID as a huge opportunity in disguise. Because as I mentioned, the example with Paris, you know, but there are many other cities, and probably some of the cities that you live in, you know, the people on this webinar live in. There are so many opportunities now to get people out of the city center, to reclaim the city center. And we see a world where, you know, all of those parking spaces will be joined, will be aggregated, just as they are in the travel world. You know, you don't have 15, 16 different hotel apps on your phone. You just have booking.com or Expedia, and you book your hotel, you book your flight. So all of that stuff is aggregated. And we see exactly the same thing happening in the mobility sort of future mobility ecosystem that smart cities will bring in. And Kerb obviously plays in that space. What we do today is parking, but what we'll do tomorrow is EV charging. We'll do last mile parcel distribution. We'll do, you know, car sharing. But you can only do that if you can aggregate all the car parks across a city. And that's the journey that we're on. So that's really the sort of, you know, what I wanted to talk about today. I think it's been a very difficult, obviously, 15 months for the world. We're not through this yet, but the cities and the smart cities that come out of this, and I think that are accelerated because of COVID, will benefit enormously by some of the doors that have opened. And from a parking perspective, you know, being able to know who's in the car park, being able to aggregate parking spaces and the data on those spaces, and having a single app that allows you to not touch anything, open a gate automatically through your phone, but it allows the city authorities and the car park owners to know who's in the car park, when, where, and in many cases whether they've got a COVID vaccination certificate. So I think that's the new world that we're coming into. But I think this is what's happened will be a boon for smart cities of tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. I'm actually a new driver. I passed my driving license like few months ago, and I'm trying to get around the city. I'm actually using car sharing apps, and parking for me, it's easier because when you use car sharing apps, you don't have to use park commuters or anything, but still I never know where to park. I don't have the app that will tell me you can leave your car here. I just need to drive around the city and see if there is a place. So yeah, app like that would be helpful. I'm used to using app for everything, and for parking, I don't have any app. So I think it is a future for people like me who want to use apps. Okay, I see Miłosz wants to ask a question. So
Sure.
Yes,
go.
yes. Hello, hi. Thank you
Hello,
for this
Milos.
presentation. It's really interesting, but I have a question. If it's not a trade secret, could you please tell us a little bit more about the Kerb gate software? I mean, what kind of solution is that? What technology have you used here? I mean, it's kind of like a SIM card is to put into the automation opening system of the gate, or it's kind of some more advanced?
Yeah, so there are systems like SIM cards. The big opportunity is that parking gates are not very sophisticated. Okay, even the German and Austrian gates, which are the most sophisticated in the world, they haven't changed with the times. Okay, they're still the same as they were last century. So you can use a SIM card, but the problem with a SIM card is it doesn't open underground, and in many parts of the world, the phone network is not reliable. You know, it might go down 10 times a day. And even if it goes down for 1 minute, if you've got 50 cars or 15 cars behind you trying to get into a car park, it's not going to be a good solution. So
Right.
what we have software inside the box, but we also have Bluetooth beacons which detect your phone. But the magic, the real secret sauce happens in the cloud. You know, we've got over 1 million lines of code that sit behind Kerb. So we know that, Milos Sawaki is at the gate, and that he's a season parker, and that he's parked here. We know what time you came in. We know what time you leave. So it's a software solution with a Bluetooth beacon, but the phone, it's a SIM card, is not. It does 10% of the job, and we have SIM cards in the box as a backup. But that's not the way that we open the gate. Our boxes are connected to the internet essentially, and the magic, if you like, happens at the cloud level on our big servers in the cloud around the world.
Very nice. Thank you so much for that.
Okay, anyone else have some questions? If you do, just you can ask them. You don't have to wait.
Hi, Rob. Thanks for your presentation. It was really informative, and it was interesting. And I'm thinking about one question at least. One thing is the possibility to cooperate with the micromobility providers. I mean, scooters, electric scooters. Are there any talks or interesting from their perspective to the solution which you are providing?
Absolutely. So when you think about what we do, what I said earlier, what we do today is parking, okay? But our vision is 100 times bigger than parking. It's a whole of city mobility solution. Now, parking's a very important part of that, because unless you can join the dots, as I said earlier, every vehicle, whether it's a scooter or a share car or a bus or a truck or a passenger car, needs to park somewhere. And has freed up a parking space somewhere else. Now, with things like scooters, the micromobility, look, realistically, people are not going to book and pay for scooters. Okay, there will be people pay for scooters. They just pick them up, but they're not going to book them in advance, because in the cities of tomorrow there'll be scooters everywhere. So what Kerb will do is our API will open up for scooter providers to be able to list all their inventory on the Kerb map. So you'll be able to, on the Kerb map, you'll be able to see in your city where all the scooters are located. You'll be able to see where the scooter parking racks are located. So that's the way we see that happening. Now, with other micromobility sort of solutions, I mean, if you take share cars, the reason that car sharing programs don't work at the moment is because and I was talking to Europcar in Paris 3 years ago, and they said to me, Rob, we have Europcar car hire company. They said we have 6,000 share cars across Ireland, Spain, France, and Germany. And they say we've got nowhere to park them. And they said that it costs our users more to park the car than it does to rent it, okay? And that's the problem. And so what you need for those kind of micro mobility and smart city mobility platforms to work and types of vehicle to work is you need a distributed network of parking spaces. So it's no good for Kerb just to have, car parking garages and car parks in downtown Berlin or downtown Budapest or downtown Paris. We need parking spaces in the suburbs as well. And because in the cities, the smart cities of tomorrow, for example, a car sharing program, I want to come out of my building and I want to be able, I'm only going to walk 1 block. I'm not going to walk 15 minutes to go and find a share car. And if I need to get an Uber to go and pick up a share car, there's no point. Okay, I might as well just stay in the Uber. So I need to have a share car 1 block, maximum 2 blocks away from where I live. I have the app, I can open the app, so the Kerb app, and I can see there's a share car there. I've got access instructions. It's not Kerb's share car, it's somebody else's share car. They're parking in a Kerb space because Kerb's an open ecosystem. And I can pick up that share car and I can drive all the way across Budapest or all the way across Vienna and I can park it somewhere else and leave it in another Kerb space. It could be in a shopping center, it could be in a church, it could be in a stadium, it could be in somebody else's private driveway. But that's the only way that we see that a connected ecosystem of micromobility services is going to work in any city. And the trick to that is aggregation. You have to have a platform that aggregates. And now Google's going to play in that space with Waze, Uber's going to play in that space, but Kerb will play in that space. And the thing about Kerb is the brand, half the world's population, 7.98 billion people come into contact, step on or step off the Kerb every single day. Whether you understand that the Kerb is the side of the road doesn't really matter. But as I say, all the different micro-mobility services that we will plug into our ecosystem, which will be third-party services. They won't be our own, most of them. They'll be third-party. So parcel lockers, scooters, bicycles, all those kind of things will be on the Kerb platform within the next 2 to 5 years.
Okay, thank you for your answer. It was really interesting one.
Okay, anyone with questions? Okay, I think they're all questions we have right now. If you do remember something you wanted to ask, you can always find Rob on LinkedIn. He will probably answer any question of yours. I think so, but I cannot speak for Rob. Yeah, and after you see the recording, maybe you will have anything more to ask. So yeah, we can move on to Karin right now. Thank you, Rob, so much. If you can stay, you're welcome to stay, but I know it's late for you, so we will understand if you need to go. Okay, so Karin, it's your turn. I'm giving you the stage and have fun.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I am going to try to share my screen. Can you see my presentation now?
Yes, I do.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Great. Then, well, my name is Karin Wiklund, and I work for a company called Edeva. We are based in Sweden. Edeva works in the fields of traffic safety, way in motion, vehicle counting and classification, and environmental sensing. And today we're talking about the traffic safety aspects of what we do, but we're also talking about active speed bumps in general. So I will try not to just talk about our own solution, but to show you a bit about what's out there in the world. We all know static speed reduction systems that aren't really systems. There's no intelligence in them. It's speed cushions, it's horizontal deflections and raised intersections and rubber speed bumps or asphalt speed bumps, humps and the speed tables of different types of solutions. They're all necessary because speeding is an issue, and the higher the speed, the worse the accidents, the higher the risk of an accident, and the higher the risk of that accident having a deadly outcome. So we need people to slow down, and we can't seem to do that just by, just by telling them that speeding is dangerous. So we need to do something physical to make them stop speeding. And these solutions have been around for, I don't know, 100 years, as long as the cars have been around, almost as long. And they haven't really developed much, and they haven't really become very intelligent. There are passive dynamic speed bumps as well. They are based on different types of technology. So this is from Spain. It's based on the viscosity of a fluid, which is a semi-fluid. So if you're driving slowly enough, that fluid will move out of the way. But if you're driving too fast, it will become firm and you will get a speed bump. This is an inflatable solution from Texas in the US. And it's used on a timer. So it's inflated during school hours and then deflated the rest of the time. This is a Swedish solution based on rubber elements that are firm, but if your vehicle is heavy enough, like a bus, then they will flatten and then they will return to their firm position. So if you're driving a car, they will stay firm because your car is not heavy enough. Then there are pneumatic solutions. I think this one is from England. And it has a rubber hose with air inside of it. And then there are vents on each side. And if you're driving slowly enough, the air will have time to dissipate. And then it will re-inflate itself. If you're driving fast enough, the air won't have time to escape from the hose. So you'll get a speed bump. This is a similar solution, also based on pneumatics. And this is a hydraulic solution from Iran, where if you drive slowly enough, the hydraulics will have time to lower the speed bump. And if you're driving too fast, it will stay firm. But these are passive. They don't measure the speed of any oncoming vehicles, and they have no intelligence built into them other than the physical aspects of the different types of solutions. But then there are active dynamic speed bumps, or active speed bumps as we usually call them. This one is from Macedonia. It is based on a solution where a piece of metal is lying flat on level with the asphalt until you're speeding, and then it raises a bit. So as you can see to the right of this picture, that's the back of a car. So we're seeing it from the back of the solution. I think it's based on mechanics. I'm not sure if it's hydraulics or mechanics, but I think it's mechanics. Then there's the Mexican solution. I think it's mostly flat, and then if you're speeding, it raises, but it could also be that it is raised, and then if you're not speeding, it will flatten and then go back to raised position again. And I think it's based on hydraulics. And then there's the Swedish solution from Edeva. It's based on a hatch that is level with the road surface if you're not speeding, and it will just stay level. But if you are speeding, the hatch will lower a few centimeters, creating sort of a dent in the road, which will be uncomfortable, and which goes for all of the solutions. It's uncomfortable and you don't want to do it again. And since you can have this choice, as long as you stay within the speed limits, you get a flat road, then a lot of people would choose to drive at the speed limits instead of too fast. So they can choose for themselves, which they cannot do with the static solutions. They can't choose if they want a level road. They can't. It doesn't matter if you choose to drive within the speed limit, because you still get a speed bump with the static solutions. But with the active solutions, then you can get the choice. But what's the point of this? I mean, slowing down traffic, it can be done in so many ways. But the thing with active speed bumps is that it's not just about slowing the traffic down, it's also about getting an optimal traffic flow. So normally you have some sort of a bell curve with the speed distribution, with some people driving too fast and others not driving too fast. But what you actually want is this: as many vehicles as possible driving at the same speed on the correct side of the speed limit, while you still want to be able to allow emergency vehicles to drive at whatever speed is necessary. This is what gives you a safe speed, but it also gives you an optimal traffic flow with, it's better for the environment when everybody is driving at the same speed and you get a continuous traffic flow instead of the braking and accelerating that causes more noise and more emissions. So if we compare this to the static solutions, then they will cause something like this. The heavier vehicles will be forced to drive much more slowly than the lighter vehicles. And if you use the speed cushion that I showed you at the beginning, then buses will be able to straddle the cushion and they will still be able to speed, but cars will be forced to drive much more slowly. So it's the reverse. But usually most solutions will affect the heavier vehicles much more than the lighter vehicles. And this includes ambulances and fire trucks. So if you have to make a speed bump that is nice enough for the buses to get a comfortable ride at some reasonable speed so that they don't have to drive at 5 kilometers per hour, for instance. If they can drive 20 and the speed limit is 30, then they can drive 20 kilometers per hour over a speed bump with a reasonable, comfortable level of driving. Then the cars will still be able to speed, which means you don't necessarily get the traffic safety effect that you're after. And it's also bad for the environment with all this decelerating and then accelerating, because it causes more fuel consumption, higher emissions, and higher noise. If we compare to regulating solutions, then we're talking traffic lights. Then you either get to stand still or you get to drive. And if you're driving, you can choose whatever speed is necessary or that you think is a good idea. Which means that the light turns yellow and we all accelerate just a bit extra to get through the light, which means that it's not a traffic safety system, it's a regulating solution. And in so many parts of the world, pedestrians and cyclists will also cross the road even though their light is red, which means that you can risk getting an accident on a crossing, because all of a sudden there's a car coming out of nowhere. So regulating solutions are just that, they are regulating, they are not traffic safety solutions. It's also bad for the environment with all this stopping and idling and then going again. So in order to get this traffic flow, you need something that is activated based on speed. And then you have active speed bumps or you have traffic cameras. Now, these are some actual results from the Swedish solution, the ActiBump, as it is called. The top curve is 2 weeks after the activation of the system, and the bottom curve is 1 year later. So we can see that we actually do get this result. We push the curve to the correct side of the speed limit, and we make sure that it is pushed together. It's not spread out as much. We don't force anyone to drive unnecessarily slowly. Now, this is a bit about how it works. The other solutions might not have radars that measure the speed. I know the Macedonian version has magnetic coils in the ground, but the Swedish solution has a radar. Each of them, regardless of how they measure, they do measure the speed and of the oncoming vehicles, and then they send this information to a control system. So this is where the intelligence lies. It can activate the active speed bump based on the speed. If you're speeding, then it will, in the Swedish case, it will lower. In the other cases, it will rise. And if you're not speeding, then it will be flat. Now, this means that there's a possibility for a lot of more intelligence. It can be a smart system, because when you have this system that gets data from the speed measuring unit, then you can also collect this data and visualize it and make sure that you can follow up on the results, which is what we do with the ActiBump. We have a software platform that collects all this data and visualizes it. So what we just saw, that's from our Ediva Live software platform with visualization of traffic flows. And we also show level of speeding and 85th percentile speed. It also means that you can have remote monitoring capabilities. So with the ActiBump, we have a camera underneath the hatch of every ActiBump, which means we can see if there's something iffy going on with the mechanics. We can also have notifications, automated notifications, if something is weird. So there's a bunch of different types of sensors in the system, which can notify us if, for instance, we lose the internet connection so that we don't get any data coming in, or if the mechanics is in a wrong position or something, which also means that we can set it to standby in case there's something going, if there's something iffy, so that we can plan a intervention, a service, which also means that we can plan the service so that we disrupt the traffic as little as possible. I mean, on some sites, we have to do maintenance during the night in order to not disrupt the traffic flow, which is possible to do when you have this intelligence in your system. So where should these be used? Well, if you start out with the map of your road network, it doesn't have to be a city. It can be a rural area with the smaller villages or smaller towns, but it can be a city like this. And then you start out by marking out, where are your black spots? Where do you have accidents? Where have there been accidents? And where do you get reports that, well, I almost got hit by a car today? Because these almost accidents, they are a clue as to where the next accident will happen. And then you mark out where you have your speeding issues. And then you mark out where you have your important bus routes or your heavy goods routes, or where you have a lot of emergency traffic going, where it's important that you get good accessibility, that this traffic flow is optimal. And then you mark out where you have noise and pollution issues, or where it's important that you don't get noise and pollution issues. And on some of these sites, not all of them, but on some of them, where all four factors coincide, or where just a few or one of the factors is present, then an active speed bump would be a good solution. Because I can't speak for the Macedonian or the Mexican solution, but the Swedish solution is made for large traffic flows with heavy traffic, a lot of buses, a lot of trucks. So it's the type of solution that you can use where you can't use the regular static solutions because they cause too much problems. It's of course more cost effective to use it if you have all 4 factors coinciding, but you don't have to have that. On some places, it's such a high priority that you get good accessibility that will motivate an active speed bump on its own. And then you can have the same, just to show you an example of a area where you can have smaller villages. If you have heavy goods transportation routes going through your countryside, then this can be a solution for those places where the traffic enters a village, or where the traffic goes through a village where, for instance, you have target points like a school or a shop or something where you have a lot of vulnerable road users walking or cycling. So this is the type of road network that is usually owned by a government and not by each city, but this varies between countries. So this is in a Swedish setting, then this would be the Swedish Road Transportation Administration, that owns this type of roads. So this is a quick case study from the Swedish Transport Administration. They made a contract with us to install 3 sites with 2 active bumps, 1 in each direction on each of the sites. The first site, the top left image, is from Ystad. This is one of the European roads, the E65, that goes to and from the harbor in Ystad, which means there's a lot of heavy traffic and a lot of very, very heavy traffic. So it needed to be a robust system that could handle all this traffic and all this weight. But they also had the issue that they had pedestrians and cyclists crossing this road. They also hadn't decided when they started the installation what speed limit they were going to set it to, because this can be set and it can be changed without having to rebuild the site in any way. So they thought this was a good system since they hadn't decided, but they were still doing the job. The second site was in Torslunda, the bottom left picture. You can see behind the fence there's a school, and then there's a bus stop on each side of the road up ahead. And they had 74% speeding drivers passing this site before they made the installation. And then 2 months after the installation, they had 5% speeding. So it's a really efficient system. Since you can choose if you want a speed bump or not, then most people will choose to not get a speed bump. They will just choose to drive at the speed limit. And then the third site was in Hammarstrand, the bottom right. And as you can see, there's a lot of snow and it was a really cold winter. It was installed in October of last year. So it has survived its first winter. You can just use your snow clearing machines over it as you would any other part of the road, which made it possible to install in such a setting where there's so much snow. Now, in Malmö, that's the third largest city in Sweden, they first made an order of 6 active bumps for installation on 3 different sites where there were roads to school. So school children would pass these sites. So they prioritized the access and traffic safety for vulnerable road users. Now their second installations was based on accessibility alone. It was defined as a measure taken to secure accessibility, attractiveness, and average speed for their new electric buses. So they even installed active bumps in bus lanes. And then just to show you a case from a different country, This is the first installation in Norway. It's from Bergen. It was a demo project, and they are doing their own evaluation now. So we're looking forward to their results. So far, we have seen through our system that they have gotten a 85th percentile speed of the speed limit, which is what they were aiming for. So we're happy with that. This project, this installation site is near a housing for visually impaired people. And as you can see, there are traffic lights, and they needed these traffic lights so that the people who can't see can at least hear when it's safe to cross the road. But they didn't get the traffic safety effect that they needed, so they installed the ActiveBump as well. On some other sites in different cities, they have replaced the traffic lights with ActiveBumps instead. But on this site and on a few other sites, they have kept the traffic lights along with the ActiveBumps. Some frequently asked questions. Do these active speed bumps damage vehicles? Well, typically no, because nobody would install them if they did. You cannot, as a city, install something that will damage vehicles, because then you will get a system that blocks the road more than it provides accessibility. I cannot speak for the Macedonian or Mexican solutions, but I know that the Swedish solution, the ActiveBump, it's been used for more than 10 years, and we've had more than 200 million passengers over the active speed bumps that are out in the world. And we've had 0 damaged cars. Now, the next question about motorcyclists is usually not posed as a polite question. It's usually yelled in a comment section in all caps somewhere, with people saying that you're gonna kill the motorcyclists. And not all solutions will do that, at least. The ActiveBump has been active for 10 years, as I said. And if they're not speeding, they shouldn't get hurt in either way. But if you are speeding, you can still pass the ActiveBump on a speeding motorcycle without getting hurt. I cannot speak for the other 2 active speed bumps that are available, but the Swedish one will work just fine for motorcycles as well. About street cleaning and snow clearing, as I said about snow clearing, you can just clear the snow right across. You don't need to make any special consideration for the Swedish solution. But the solutions that are protruding up from the ground, that will cause an issue for snow clearing and street cleaning, since they are in the way, sort of. So the snow clearing and street cleaning vehicles would have to be maintaining the legal speed in order to get a level road, whereas the Swedish solution will go down, so they will push some dirt or snow into the underneath the hatch, and that will be fine, because it's connected to road water inlets. So any snow and ice that will get down will be melted away by a heating coil and will flow out into the road water inlet. Whereas I don't know if the Mexican or Macedonian solutions have connection to drain water, but they do need to have some sort of way to avoid damaging the technical solutions from rain. If about emergency vehicles, can they drive at whatever speed is necessary? On most solutions, they can. There are different types of exceptions that can be made for emergency vehicles. The ActiveBump has a transponder solution, for instance. And from what I've seen from the other solutions, then they can make exceptions too. This is just to show you the kind of solution we're talking about. From what I've seen on the other 2 solutions, they too are quite big as they are installed. So this is the ActiveBump. It weighs 4,300 kilos. But it comes like this, pre-assembled. So all you need to do is just dig a hole, put it down, connect into electricity and road water, and then backfill around it. So the installation is very undramatic and very easy to do. So that was my last image. Do we have any questions?
I have, for sure. I wanted to ask, because usually hitting the speed bump is enough punishment for the driver, so they want to slow down before. But there are some crazy drivers in each city that they don't care about the speed limit. So did you think about putting like the camera and connecting the solution with local police or something like this? So if someone is not slowing down, the police would get the image like in photo radars.
We can do that. In Sweden, we have some certain camera rules that prohibit it, but it is possible, and we can do that in other countries if there's a desire for it. But in Sweden, the camera rules make sure that we can't decide to put up a camera. The Swedish Transport Administration has to decide that. So they haven't done that on these sites. They have used it as a complement to the cameras. They use cameras on roads with speed limits of 70 and upward, and they use active bumps on roads with speed limit 50 and downwards.
Okay, thank you. Milos, I see you have a question.
Yes. Hello. Hi, Karin. Thank you so much for your speech. So very interesting. And I want to ask you, like, according to this active speed bumps, you showed us several solutions from different countries, and each of them are slightly different but have similar structure. And I wonder, what do you think about the not physical solution, but rather more visual? Like, for example, in my area, there is like a two interactive road signs, like a big boards with a sensor that measure the speed of the oncoming cars, and with these boards asking them to slow down with the shiny big signs. And there is like a not even bump anywhere around on the road, but only the sign very close to the road. And I noticed that it also makes the drivers slow down before the pedestrian area. And I think, like, I just wonder if you met with this kind of solution, and what do you think about it?
Well, we have that in Sweden too. So I've seen it. We actually have that quite close to our office. What I read in research is that these work for a period of time when you first put them there, and then you need to move them around in order to keep the effect. So that's the research in Sweden has shown that. So usually it just works as a reminder that you're speeding, but you don't have to change your behavior since there's not a speed bump connected to it. So that's what I know about the solutions. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you maybe remember like what period of time should be like switched to another place to keep this
I
activity?
think it was a month or two. So not very long,
yeah,
just a couple of months. Yeah.
I see. Okay, thank you so much for that.
Okay, any questions?
Yeah, I do have a question too to Karin. So thank you for your presentation. It is an interesting topic. As Rob says, I believe as drivers, we don't like such solutions, but we would like to be safe and we would like to communicate efficiently. So this is necessary until we will not compromise on some freedom issues, which probably in a longer future speed limits will be installed in our cars in software maybe, but for now we need to look for some solutions, semi-solutions with hardware. I was also thinking about your solution and using it as your infrastructure as a data providing point. So whether are you considering or maybe using it as some measuring and providing data to city about the traffic, city traffic, or some incidents or other stuff like this?
Yes, the software platform collects data about the traffic, so we can find out the number of vehicles, the types of vehicles. We can find out how many are speeding and how many are not. The 85th percentile speed, the traffic flow. So we use it as a smart system to deliver a lot of data to the city. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you.
Okay, any more questions? I have one more if no one has any.
Good one, Patricia. Yeah, you're first.
Okay, so I know as a user, the solution is really helpful, and I would like to have solutions like this on our routes. But as a government who has to put the solution into the route, like the previous solution that we have right now, they are put on the top of the road. But when I saw yours, you have to interfere with the structure of the road. So you have to take off some road, and you need to make a hole for that. Does the government has any hesitation like to install it because of that, or they're like, yeah, it makes sense, so we are doing that?
We haven't met with anyone that has had any problems with the whole just digging a hole. It's usually a bit more complex about permissions and definitions of, is this defined as a speed bump or is it defined as something else? And where are the rules at? Like, what are the rules depending on if there even are any rules applicable to this type of solution. So usually there's a permission required from some government administration. And usually that has nothing to do with if you want to dig into the road or not. It usually just has to do with legislative issues.
Yeah, probably in Poland it would be the problem. We have the problem to take care of the holes that already exist. So yeah. Digging one, the new one, it would be the problem probably. But hopefully in the future we'll have more solutions like that in our country. Because I see the change. We are trying to get smart, and there is a lot of great solutions. But still, I think we are behind some other countries in Europe. So I hope that we will have more solutions like that in the future. Paweł, you wanted to ask something else?
Yes, that's right. And I believe also that in Poland we do have the highest rate of death accidents, and the number one cause is the speed. So I believe such solution would be helpful in our country too. And you, Karin, shared with us those case studies from Sweden and from Norway. And what about the other countries? Can you share some information whether you are entering any other countries? What are the plans in some future?
Well, it's a global market for us. I mean, the problem with speeding is global, so we can install in any country. And since this is remotely monitored, we have no issues with installing anywhere. So we actually have installations in Australia already. We have in Sweden and Norway. We are about to install in France. We have processes going on in Czech Republic and Romania, and in Denmark and Finland at the moment. So those are just where we are right now, but we see this as a global solution.
Okay, thank you. So we are looking forward for you in Poland pretty soon, I believe. Thank you.
Okay, guys. Anyone has any questions?
Maybe the last one, as this solution is more hardware, and we are looking into the future, and maybe we can discuss and make some vision in the longer term. What do you think about this whole process of software and getting more software into the cars and the whole mobility, and how your solution is trying to looking for the information from the market and how to be competitive in the future? Because I believe this is something which will be more into the software, and more cars will be prepared for some solutions like virtual reality or augmented reality. Is this something which your company is also developing in some kind of R&D stuff?
We are mostly looking at vehicle classification, vehicle data, using both number plate cameras and radars to measure both measure their speed and measure what type of vehicle it is. And using the number plate cameras, we can also define, like, is this a vehicle with an electric motor, or is it a diesel? And how many previous owners has this had? We can get all kinds of information just based on the number plate. So we are looking into that as an R&D thing right now. But we're also using since we have the platform already that collects and visualizes data, then we can collect all kinds of other data as well. So we are just in a demo project with environmental sensing, where we can measure the pollution, the rate of pollution. We can measure noise, we can measure vibrations and weather stations and everything. So we are demoing that right now with mobile sensor kits, where we can get a heat map of the city, where we can see that you have pollution issues over here, but this one area is fine, so that we can also make changes. And for instance, we can see what happens if we close this one road for traffic during the summer. Then we can see where the traffic ended up, and if we got pollution over here when we closed this road over here, and just to follow up in real time. So that's our current R&D situation. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for this leap forward to the future. Thank you.
Okay, so I think that's all of the questions, and if not, you can also find Karin on LinkedIn, and she will answer your questions, or she will direct you to someone who have time for it, because I know Karin is really busy with all the speeches. So yeah, feel free to find Karin on LinkedIn as well. And I see we are running out of time. So, and also we have smaller group event at the beginning. So I think we will do the separate event for networking really soon. We will gather all the people that couldn't join us today, and they will watch the recording, and probably they will want to meet you all. So I think for today we will finish, unless anyone wants to say something. Okay.
I would like to say thank you for the interesting event.
Yeah, thank you for joining, and hopefully we'll be able to do the next event really soon. And yeah, the most important thing, if you are interested in events like that, I recommend to join our group. I will send with the recording, I will send the link to the group, and there will be the place where you can ask for next events. Like if you want to do this about maybe the PropTech part of Smart City, or anything you want to, any information you want to get, we can organize it. That's why we created that group. So yes, thank you so much, Rob and Karin, for finding the time. Thank you all for joining, and thank you all for watching the recording later. And yes, see you soon on the next events.
Thank you.
Patricia. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you,
Bye.
Karin. Thank you, guys.